That's awesome. And I've seen that you help both veterans and first responders, kind of the same thing we do here on the show. And I think it's a noble thing for many people to give back that way, knowing the things that you've went through and both of you went through, and knowing what your brothers and sisters still need that are coming out now, and those who never wanted to admit that they had issues for many years until finally they hit a wall, and then they have to run looking for something to help. So it's a great thing you're doing. So is the name of that Sin Pare, I think it was called, right?
I pronounce it Sign Perry Motorsports.
Okay.
But I'm not a Latin major. I believe it's pronounced differently in Latin, but
I'm sure. I mean, I probably just butchered it to death right there, so that's good. I'm just a guy from New Jersey. I don't speak a lot of good languages. I know English barely, and I can get by with that. So that's a good thing. I have a former soldier who's also in North Carolina. He has a racing nonprofit as well called Warriors in Motion. He races BMWs right down at Rockingham.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
So I visited him, I think in March when I was out there the last time training, and he has a pretty good little compound out there, and he talked me all through it. I always put his link on here to help him out. If you want me to help you with yours, just send me your link. I'll put it on there.
Okay.
So we've seen the clip in the beginning of Guerrera, of course. There's more Cassie's thing, like you said, in the green room. But if either one of you want to start to talk on how that was important to shaping what you guys did and to help the future of women in combat, let's dive into that.
Just make sure I understand the question. So you mean like how it got started, like how it ended up happening?
How the project started and what it means to you.
So I mean, it was started by Jess Yawn. She was a CS. Funny story. Jeremy and I actually met through Jess Yawn, who was his CST. So we were CST together, but once we deployed to CST, we were farmed out, to a bunch of different places. Some girls went to the SMU, some girls went to SF, some went to Rangers. I was with the Rangers. Jess was with the SMU. And so she was his CST. And when she came back, when we came back from deployment, she knew that, I had gotten divorced. He was getting divorced. And so she, continually tried to get us to meet. And so we met that way. And then, Guerrera originally, her original plan was, it was just supposed to be kind of like a little mini clip, kind of during some of the BLM stuff. She felt like there was real, all the division. She wanted to basically put a clip up that showed the diversity of CST. I mean, we had a lot of diversity. Women basically were pulled from all over the Army, volunteer style. And we had just a ton of diversity. So she was wanting to just do this little mini clip for it. And her cousin was dating Will Agee, who is the producer of Guerrera, or the filmmaker. Of course, she pitched it to him. He was like, yeah, I'll do that for you. And so, he started doing some small interviews, and after he got a hold of it, he realized I can't squeeze this into 5 minutes. And so, originally when, Jess had asked us to do it, we were like, oh, sure, I'll do a little interview. I don't mind doing that. Right. We had no idea that it was going to turn into what it turned into, an entire, practically almost a mini series. Right. And it really does mean a lot. It's been, gosh, was it 4 years almost 5 years in the making? And for forever, we weren't sure if it was going to happen. All the filming had been done, but, it was kind of, some of the getting it, on the platforms and stuff took a while. But getting to tell, our story that wove together, the way Will was able to weave CST, even with, other special operations, was great. And, getting to tell, women in special forces, along with some of the Lioness with FET, and then of course CST, we were the trailblazers trying to get the combat MOSs open to women, in a way that maintain the standards, but let them try if they wanted to. And that's pretty important to me. They say it right in Guerrera. If you watch it, don't change the standard, just let them try, if they don't make it, they don't make it. Don't make it political.
Definitely. And I think that's a lot of what happened when the integration was going on. It was a political softball for each side. They wanted to play it to their base and try to make things either work or not work for their votes. And that's the worst way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy, I know you were participating in it, and
Perhaps.
I got to see your dog in it and stuff like that. So your dog got to be a star in the show as well.
Yeah.
So tell me how you felt about it without going on, I guess.
So, for me, like I had no clue it was going to be what it was. I think initially, Cassie had told me like, oh, like Jess asked me if I just do this interview, and like, this was just about Cassie. Like there was never, a question of me doing it. And I don't remember if it was when Will first came or right before he came that they found out kind of like my background a little bit. And I had, worked with Jess, so I was tied with the CSTs and stuff. So then, Will asked if he could interview me, which turned into, I think the first one was like 3 or 4 hours. Like it was kind of crazy. And then just over the next few years, like every time he was passing through town, he'd stop by and be like, hey, can I film this? Can I film that? And like, as Cassie kind of said, it kind of felt like it like we didn't know what was going to happen. If anything was ever going to happen with it and all of that. So once it did make it to platforms, it was obviously a relief, but then exciting. Like me personally, I think like, I don't like being on camera. I don't like doing interviews or anything like that, but if I can help, tell their story or even just because of my background, people have skewed ways of thinking, like validate what they did, then so be it,
Definitely. And I think the intermixing of the guys who worked with the CSTs and the CSTs themselves, their own stories, helped make career more of a, I guess, inspirational to the young women coming up now, and homage to those who fought before you, to show that women can do it, and women were in the fight the whole time. They were on Guad anyway, just doing different aspects of it, not the direct action like that, but they got to do that in different ways as they move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I knew some of the guys in it. The one ranger who was wounded and he was in there missing the eye. You can tell he was hardcore against it in the beginning, and kind of his idea of it changed after, I guess, the incident where he got wounded.
Mm-hmm.
If you felt the same way. Yeah.
I don't know Tom personally, but I mean, having worked with the CSTs, I'd say they did whoever their CST was would probably already proved their worth at that point. Like, I don't think it was that incident that changed his mind, but he probably already knew that their worth before that.
It seemed like all of them had preconceived notions, like every male dominant MOS did at the time, and then coming in, having to not know what to do with your hands because you never had a woman around you in combat or in the army, and it's hard for some dudes to get over that. And when you see that they can actually do the same things you do, and probably some of them do it better because they're actually clean when they're doing it, and it's a lot better for everyone around. And I know the females I worked with were meticulous, and if you gave them a task, they made sure they did everything to standard to make sure that everything went perfectly right. When if I gave one of my male soldiers a task, it would get done, but it would be, it'd be like that shade tree mechanic kind of deal. It might get done to a standard, not the standard. I don't know if that's some of your experiences as well.
I mean, yes, being a female, obviously in the Marines, where there's way fewer of you, and then throughout my career, as a very perfectionist-driven woman, you never want to mess up. Like if a guy messes up, people laugh and shrug and move on. If the chick messes up, I mean, it's talked about for forever. You never live it down. So I mean, you definitely live under an umbrella of everything has to be perfect, because I don't want them to laugh at me. I think about going out on target with the Rangers. They would all fall down in kit in their MVGs. They all did it. But if CST fell down, she didn't live it down, which of course you still did. They just would laugh at you and make fun of you for forever in the ready room because you fell down last mission. But then you're like, but there were 5 other Rangers that tripped over the same thing and fell down in front of me. They didn't care. CST fell down, and that's funny. So, you know, I mean, you just have to kind of get used to it. That's just kind of the way it is. I mean, you know, but yeah, it's best to try to be on your P's and Q's and do the best job you can so that that's your reputation.
It definitely does. We got a question already from the audience. This is from One for Life. Cassie, what was it like being selected for a CST and working with Ranger battalions? Thank you, One for Life.
That's a great question. It was everything I ever wanted. You know, I spent my career, you know, trying to claw my way towards something like that wasn't available to me, you know, because of the combat ban. I mean, I remember when my friend came running up to me with the Army Times while I was still in MOS school, once I'd finally gotten into the regular Army. And he hands me this piece of paper, and it's talking about the cultural sport teams, like right on the front of it. And I just remember, like, just right there in the doorway, we're supposed to be going to class. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. Like, this is it. And I'm stuck in MOS school. I can't even go do it yet because I have to get to a unit. And then I probably have to be with the unit for a couple years. And then I'll be able to do it. Maybe it'll be gone, you know, and I'm freaking out because this is it. That's all I can think, you know. And it did take me a while. I ended up having to go to my unit. I had to do a 12-month deployment with them before I could apply to CST. But, you know, I made it through. I did everything I was supposed to. Perfect. Came back, applied, you know, and I mean, you applied through email and you did all this, you know, stuff to apply. And then I think it was like maybe 250 women for mine. I did CST 5. So we were the 5th iteration. I think like something around 250 women applied through the online. Only 103 or so of us went to selection. You know, and selection was kind of modeled after civil affairs / SF. It was kind of geared a little bit more towards what CSTs were going to be doing. But it was kind of modeled off of those, and it was run by civil affairs and SF and the Rangers, you know, kind of like a collaboration thing. You know, it was tough. And getting selected, I mean, you know, kind of like in SFAS, they put you in formation and you're standing outside of this building, and you know, you're watching girls go in one door and then they would come out the other door and they were either smiling or they were crying. And there was really no in between. There was one or the other. And, you know, you're standing in this formation and it's slowly getting smaller and smaller as girls go in and filter, you know, out the other door. And I was one of the last girls to be called in. And I sit down, and this is a person I don't even recognize. I'm assuming they were some sort of assessor that I probably just never noticed when in my little, you know, candidate bubble. And he kind of just wants to bullshit with me a little bit first. And I'm just like, if you don't tell me I'm going to come across this table, I need to know whether I'm leaving this room crying or whether I'm leaving it smiling. Like, you know, and finally he tells me, and, you know, I get to leave the tent, you know, smiling, go back to the tent, you know, where there are some girls crying and there are some girls smiling, which is kind of awkward. You know, but getting selected was awesome, you know, and then we went through some more training, and that was not the end all be all. After that, there was 6 weeks of training that we did that was run by the civil affairs, SF, and Rangers, and they're watching you, and you can be cut at any time during that 6 weeks. We went through all of that, made it through that, and then there was 18 days. So I got chosen to go with the Rangers. They kind of took the more aggressive females to go to the Rangers. I threw down one of the role players when they told us not to. And I instantly knew, I was like, well, if I don't get cut, I'm going Ranger. And I did. And I'm really glad I did. SF was a little bit more hearts and mind. You know, Rangers were kicking indoors, direct action. And so, you know, I got to go Ranger. And there was 18 days of PMT run by 4 Rangers, just putting us through, like trying to teach us how going on target went and stuff like that. And, you know, they could cut us there too. So, you know, finally get to go. And I mean, I can't, it was like I found my home, like I found the tribe, and it was a hard tribe to get into. I mean, you know, when I got over there, they don't know you. They've had a CST before, you know, but, you know, they don't know you. And you also don't really know your job. You know, you're pretty new at it because, I mean, the way they created CST we were always swapping out. So, but it was awesome. Once you earned the men's trust and you kind of, after a couple of missions really started to get a feel for what they wanted from you. And, getting to go on target and watch them, you're not kicking indoors, but you're watching them, and then you're searching the women and children, and then you're asking questions and you're getting the info that they need. And, you may or may not be the reason that they catch the guy that we need. It was amazing. It was amazing to be at the tip of the spear and be part of that process of trying to put the bad guys away, and trying to make Afghanistan a safer place, as best you could. So it was amazing. I peaked at 31 years old. I'll never go further. It's okay.
You still have a lot to give. You'll have more to do in life. That's chapter 1 or chapter 2. And you'll have a lot more to add in as you move forward in life. So your experiences, what was the craziest thing you experienced as a CST while over there?
Oh man, craziest thing I experienced as a CST. I guess I can think of a couple incidents. I kept a journal the whole time I was over there. I tried to make sure I didn't write anything secret in it, but I kept a journal of only when we went out on target. So it's mostly of me falling down and then getting laughed at, or feeling like I didn't do, good enough or whatever. But, it chronicles. And I was reading through a few, and we had, one pretty big mission where, the Rangers actually had to throw grenades, and there were a lot of EKIA for that one. We did my second mission. There was a helicopter incident where the helicopter tried to roll off a hill that it landed on. It's only my second mission. I don't know anything. I'm just the CST. But the bird lands and it feels wonky. I'm like, why is this so weird? And the ramp doesn't come down. And normally they land, the ramp comes down, and you are sprinting off the bird, right? You unhook and go. But that doesn't happen. Everybody's just kind of sitting there. The Rangers are looking. You can see their nods, going back and forth, looking at each other. Nobody knows what's going on. And finally, the ramp flops down. So we all kind of stand up slowly, and we're not getting off very quickly, and nobody really knows why. We're just kind of shuffling. And I get to the edge to step off. The dog guy's next to me. And I go to step off, and the ground is moving. The bird is moving in one direction, the ground is moving in another. And I'm like, what is happening? And I can't step off because it's moving in the direction I want to walk. And so I just kind of tips back and forth. And then I feel the bird partially take off and settle. And then it starts to truly take off with the ramp totally down, people standing on the edge of it. This bird is going to lift in the air, a Chinook, CH-47. And now I have to make a decision. I'm on the edge of the ramp. It's too tall now for me to reach anything. I can't touch anything. I can either squat down and grip the front of this ramp, which is kind of, angled down, and I'm about to go hundreds of feet in the air with all my kit on. Can I hold on? Do I turn around and maybe grab the Ranger behind me and hope he can hold on to something? Probably not going to appreciate that if we both tumble out together. Or I decided I could jump because I thought I could still see the ground under my nods. So I jumped. And I probably fell 10 or 15 feet and landed feet and then bottom. Hurt my ankle a little bit, but limped off. Later on, found out after the deployment, which I knew I was hurt during the deployment. I just didn't tell anybody. I hit it. But I actually catastrophically shattered one of my discs in my cervical spine, and now had 2 surgeries to correct that. But hashtag worth it. I wasn't leaving. They couldn't make me go home. So that was probably the craziest. Besides, obviously getting shot at for the first time, but hearing the snaps over your head was wild, because I had never experienced anything like that. It wasn't a big deal to the Rangers, but for me, I was like, that's what snaps sound like. Okay.
This is a fun time. We got another question. It goes right into what you said about you peaking. I think this is at Clark Bar 1. What challenges did you both face transitioning from high tempo military life to civilian roles? Thanks, Clark Bar.
All right. I guess I'll take the lead on that one since Cassie answered the last one. for me, transition sucked. And honestly, I still struggle with it. Like Cassie kind of said, like, I don't feel like I necessarily peaked, when I did the things I did in the military, but like, there's nothing that's ever going to compare to that. And then, civilian life, most people don't understand. They weren't deployed. They weren't in gunfights, So I will say transition sucks. However, that's not a reason to give up or whatever. It's just a new challenge in life, and, go learn new skills and, go, like you said, Rich, that was chapter 1. Well, it's time to go write chapter 2, so.
Great answer. Clark Bar one, I hope that helped you out there. For most of us, when we transition, it's not knowing what to do with your hands. And for me, it's like running into a wall. You went from having structure every day of your life until then the next day you have nothing. You didn't have a reason to wake up. And I spent a year with nothing to do. I didn't have a job, couldn't get one. I sat on the couch and drank with my dogs. That's what I did for a year until I finally found a job. And then my life started turning into a better chapter started. And I seen the light, and I kept running forward towards the light, and I haven't stopped since. And I think that's kind of what you do with your work with the organization, and other organizations do that too. Try to get people to realize that there is a purpose out there, and you just got to really get on that treadmill and find that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for you, I guess adrenaline was part of it too, with racing. So, yeah, Cassie, I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. I definitely struggled with it. He retired before me. We both med retired. My med board wasn't very pleasant because I did not have a good VA exam, and so
because you're a woman.
All of my injuries were basically not documented very well because I refused to go to sick call, and that doesn't work very well in your favor when you go to the VA. And then you have a bad examiner who basically didn't believe a word that came out of my mouth because she kind of was like, "Women don't go to combat," and so I almost got med separated. Thanks for playing, later. I had to fight really hard. So by the time I managed to get out and, did get med retired, thank goodness, I was really bitter because it's not how I wanted to end my career. And then getting just drugged through the mud through that med board process was just the cherry on top. And so, like for 4 years, I was kind of like, I don't want to associate with anyone besides my husband. And I kind of hid in the house and I fostered kittens. I just didn't want to engage in anything. And then I finally got some decent therapy. And then the MARSOC cadre job popped up on a CST newsletter. They sometimes they put out a little newsletter with just, motivational stuff for women or what some CSTs are doing and just, stuff like that. And they put a little advertisement that, MARSOC was looking for women that had been through special operations, assessment and selections, and had also been to combat in a special operations role. And I was like, well, geez, I fit that. Like, I didn't think I ever wanted to go back to work, but maybe this would be good for me to come out of the house and stop just being a crazy cat lady. And so I did, and I actually love it. I just finished my seventh assessment and selection with them. And it's like being back in the military, but without all the bullshit for the most part. There's still a little bit, you are still dealing, with green suiters, but it's got structure, it's got a mission, it's got some adrenaline because, you have to be straight faced with the candidates. And I absolutely love it and found kind of at least a little snippet of like purpose again. But before that, I was struggling super hard and couldn't find anything that seemed to help it.
Outstanding. I'm glad you're out of the house now and doing that. And
I don't know. I kind of liked it when she was in the house.
I bet. I know for me, working with soldiers now, I know I can go home at night and I can do the rah stuff all day long and push them, make sure they're doing the right thing so they come back from their next rendezvous. But I also can go home every night, and that's a big plus of that. To my wife, when I went through that year of not transitioning good, she really hated having me here because I was home and I was never home when I was in the service. But she didn't know what to do with me home. What do you do? Don't you have somewhere to go? Can't you pack your bag and just go somewhere? So I would try to find things about the house, but it's better now. We've learned to live with each other. We got another question in here. This one's for you, Jeremy. Doors closed, windows open. Great name. Jeremy, how did your time in Special Missions Unit shape your view of leadership and life after service?
So honestly, I don't know if it necessarily shaped my view on leadership. I think by the time I got there, I had a pretty solid, opinion on, leadership, and, I'd already established my style of leadership at that point, in my career. But I will say over there, as with anywhere else in the military, you got good leaders and you got bad. And I will, in that SMU, I had the worst leadership I've ever experienced in 20 years. So just because dudes are good at one thing doesn't make them good leaders. It's all about the person. So at least that's my view. And I always treated my subordinates, they were people. They weren't tools or peons or whatever. And then after the service, I'll say at least not necessarily leadership, but just being in the SMU and everything else, I guess, kind of that drive is still there, after the military, still pushing to achieve things and, I don't know, chasing that next great thing, maybe. Hope that answers their question.
I think it does. I think that really answers. Cassie, if you had to answer that question, how was your time in the CSD, and how has that affected your leadership skills as you move forward?
Well, I have to be a little honest. Like I said, CSD wasn't really a leadership role per se. I I listened to the lowliest private if he told me what I needed to do, because the Rangers knew better than I did. They were the ones who, we got very little training before we went out with them. We got more. It was kind of on the job, figuring it out. But I will say, in line with Guerrera, I didn't realize that CST was going to mean that I was going to kind of be a role model, and through All True, almost become like a role model mentor, to be passing on my experience to other people. So I guess, for me, I had I did CST when I was in E7. I was, mostly CST is officers for whatever reason, like young lieutenants and captains tend to fit that bill better. But I was one of the few NCOs that did it, and I did it pretty late in my career as an E7. So I had a pretty good grasp on what my leadership style was too. And just like him, I always treated everyone kind of exactly the same. Like we're on a team, and I'm not going to talk to you like you're not basically the same as me. And then, I guess, CST probably did CST helped me open my horizons on being super straight arrow and thinking outside the box. I guess I grew in that way. Seeing the Rangers and how disciplined they were and how precise they were. But man, they also played hard, had fights between the privates, in between the squad bays. They were crazy. And so, for me, I'd always kind of been very straight arrow. Like I said, you got to be perfect. And I guess I did learn in CST to kind of let that go a little bit. And when I came back, I was always trying to be very conscious of understanding when maybe rules in regular Army were kind of silly, and that I could actually push back and be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't do this in special operations. Why in the world are we doing it in regular Army? Just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it should be that way. So I did grow in that capacity, learning that outside the box thinking is really beneficial, if that helps.
I think so. Yeah, that's outstanding. And it mirror answers that you both established your leadership style prior to going on to the other side of the fence. And you just used the leadership style that you already established and fostered within yourselves to go forward. And like you said, you were listening to the lowest private because they knew what to do on the other end of that gun and what to do when they entered the building anyway. And listening to them would help you come out the other side as well. And that's a form of leadership too, learn to lead up and down. So, and we got another one popped in here. This is from Friend Stuff. How do you maintain a strong marriage and partnership after such intense and separate career paths? Thanks, Friend Stuff.
Lots of work.
Lots of work.
That's true. At least for me, it's focusing on our marriage every day, even if we're apart. We still do the little things. A nightly phone call to say goodnight. Obviously when we can, this stuff like that. We put in the effort. Every day.
It's interesting. We just had our 10-year anniversary actually, and I think we've slowly but surely realized that love is actually something you have to work on. It's not like the Disney movies where you fall in love and it's happily ever after. It really isn't. There's so much. There's actually a ton of good books out there on love and like relationships and like actual good stuff. There's crap out there, and then there's actual good stuff. Brene Brown or the Gottman Theory, stuff like that. Those books are actually legitimate, and it actually takes work on both our parts to like try to understand each other, work on our communication skills. But it helps that we're best friends. I will say, us coming from like basically we've had very similar experiences. We can talk about almost everything. Like we can share, bad things that happen during deployment, bad things that happen during childhood, we try to be best friends. I mean, sometimes we annoy each other and, we have the same, marital problems that everyone else can have, but, it's a work in progress. It's not something to run away from when we have trouble. It's something to, the growth mindset, no different than like post-traumatic growth. Same thing with relationship. Your relationship has to keep growing. You can't think that it's going to just stay the same and always be perfect. Each of you are growing and trying to actualize in your own way, and you're supporting each other. And one might change a little bit, and the other one has to find a way to, be on board with that. So it's definitely, we still have to work at it,
Well,
I think a big part of it too is maintaining separate identities, where the marriage doesn't become, or our relationship doesn't become our identity, but we're still two separate individuals who, also happen to be in this marriage or your relationship.
That helps a lot too, understanding that you are two different people, even though you share the same journey together. You're two different people that have to share together, and communication is key. We just hit 31 years on Tuesday, and
congratulations.
That's a huge milestone. Serving my whole career with her, which is unheard of. It's very rare that someone stays with the same spouse throughout their career. So it was a fun ride, and we also had our ups and downs. I call it a roller coaster. Most of the roller coasters was saved by me getting deployed or sent somewhere and hitting the reset button and coming back. So.
I get that. That's the reason my first marriage lasted as long as it did, because I was never home. Like, be home for about 3 weeks, and as soon as we get pissed off at each other, I'd be out the door again. So
hit the reset button every time.
Yeah, honeymooning is a thing.
Yes. We got another one in from Eloquent Banquet. What advice would you give to veterans who are struggling to find a new purpose? Thank you, Eloquent Banquet. Or Eloquent Bouquet, I'm sorry.
Don't be afraid to venture out of your comfort zone. I mean, growth comes from being just uncomfortable. So, go try things you wouldn't normally try or you think you would enjoy. I think post-retirement, I've definitely become, more adventurous, or, rather than immediately saying no to things, be like, you know what, why not? Like, I've never done that. I've never experienced that, life is all about, experiences, that's all we get to take with us at the end. So, just keep looking, keep trying.
There's a lot of nonprofits out there. Jeremy, had the motorsports one, and then you mentioned that there's another one pretty near us. I just ran into while I was at MARSOC this time. There's a gentleman who's doing a nonprofit for EDM, the electronic dance music. He's providing like a safe space for veterans to go and do this electronic dance music, but in like a space where they know that things are safe, so they can turn off that, the hypervigilance. And I just thought, wow. And even he was like kind of stunned that he had gotten into it. Like he had fallen into it and it's getting huge. And I just thought, I never thought of EDM for, for PTSD or, therapy purposes, but he says it's actually working really well, so, I just thought if there's that out there, there's all kinds of things out there that, you can try to find what you need to do. And like I said, I mean, I thought that I never wanted to work again. And then I tried it and I found something that fit me. I guess that's the hardest part, is finding something that fits you, and something that you're passionate about. And then I think giving back is huge, like service to your community. Like for MARSOC, I feel like I still get to be part of like the special operations community. I'm helping to select the next, young batch of little raiders, and that's, I love still being in the special operations mix a little bit, but then I also like fostering kittens, and I feel like I'm helping my community in that way, when I take in the sick ones and make sure they're spayed and neutered and, stuff like that. So I guess just, and I liked helping Jeremy with Sign Perry, where, we were hosting veterans and, they got out of that vehicle and they were just grinning ear to ear, after, Jeremy's taking them ripping around the course, that sense of service, of giving back and taking your trauma and being vulnerable with it and helping other people is huge.
It definitely is. When you said EDM, it made me think of my trip to Kandahar, Afghanistan. I was checking towers on our fob, and had a young E5 in a tower on one of our cameras, and all I can see was lights flashing in there as I was walking up. And I walked up, and he's naked inside the guard tower with chem lights just dancing in there. I was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "No one's out here, Sergeant. I'm having fun." I said, "Oh my!" I said, "Get out." That brought that memory back to me. It was horrible, but it came back.
He was self-entertaining.
Yeah,
he probably did it every night when I wasn't on the watch. So it just it was his style. We got another one from Buster Dave. Must be a Dave and Buster fan. How can civilians and communities better support veterans dealing with PTSD and transition issues? Thanks, Buster Dave.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's not a question to just be put on the spot with and have an answer. Anything? Can we circle back to that?
Yeah, we can circle back. I mean, I know there's other nonprofits out there that kind of mix the civilian and the veteran world, like a Team RWB or Travis Manion Foundation. They both mix kind of both together, and that kind of gets both stories together. Kind of helps share the burden and of learning about each other and your paths together. And I think that's more of the problem, is being able to sit down and actually listen to each other, to learn about the why behind the PTSD instead of just saying, "Oh, that's a broken veteran." Personally, that was a pretty good question. We don't usually get them deep questions like that on here, so you guys brought it out of something. Thank you. And they got you too with the curveball. That was good.
Yeah, they did.
Well, like you said, the communication gap is huge. Like them being able to base and understand. Like, I mean, most people who meet me either think I'm an asshole or I'm just like really, rough around the edges and crass. But like, get to know me. I at least she doesn't think I'm that bad of a guy. So, I got something going for me. But I think that kind of translates across most the veteran population. I think people who haven't been there, they might think we're rough around the edges and stuff like that, and they just, if they took the time, to kind of get to know us or understand, like it's, I don't know, maybe it's just a result of our experiences where we're a little bit more standoffish, but
probably. And they even in the workplace, if you're not working with military still, you go and work into a civilian workplace, you can't go in there with the thought that the standards in that workplace are going to be the same as they were when you were in the military. You got to go in like you're going to a new unit and kind of sit back, relax, enjoy the show for a little bit before you go in like a hurricane and try to blow things up.
I got fired from my first civilian job ever right after I got out of the Marine Corps. I went and worked at a veterinary clinic. And it was full of women, women can be mean. And I just was trying to improve my AO, right? Like they had some stuff that, I'm pretty good with like Word and Excel and stuff. And they had some products that I was like, man, these could use some tweaking. So I remade them. Evidently I was stepping on toes and proceeded to get fired because I was just trying to improve things that they didn't appreciate me changing and improving. Just cause, and you know, I had no idea that I wasn't supposed to do that. It was kind of a tough lesson. I was like, I just got fired. Like, it was, you know, strange. I guess circling back to that question that we were having trouble answering, I think as part of it is, understanding that veterans are wired different. And so, when you're interacting with a former veteran, you know, we probably do weird things that just don't make sense, but it's because, you know, we've been in such structure, you know, that, we're going to do odd things. So I don't know if that would count as supporting them better or just like understanding that, you know, we have quirks, you know, like in grocery stores, I don't like when people walk behind me. And so I'll avoid an aisle if there's someone in there, you know, and when we go sit in restaurants, he wants to sit with his back to the wall and he wants to be able to see the entrance. And it's funny because waitresses will put the stuff down and we'll move it all around because it's like, no, we're going to sit on this side of the table. I guess, I guess maybe movies don't portray that very well. You know, normally they portray, you know, the crazy veteran that's, you know, hyper vigilant or whatever. And we are hyper vigilant, but, you know, not normally in a completely, you know, batshit crazy way.
Exactly. My wife knows when we go to a restaurant, she'll look at the table and the chairs, and she'll say, "I guess you're sitting there." It has to be the same way every time. Otherwise, I'm not going to sit, or I'll be just antsy the whole time sitting there. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And she understands that now. And sometimes she'll try to poke the bear and make me sit where she wants me to sit, and then I wind up moving anyway, or move the chair to a different angle. So. And then we're both uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So as we start to wrap up here, we're at 52 minutes now into the show. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe. YouTube, for some reason, cut us off saying we were talking about weapons. I'm not sure what happened, what we talked about weapons, but I didn't hear it, but they did. So
I probably said gunfight.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, we'll fix that later. But as we end the show here on the Misfit Nation, we usually ask two questions. What's the best way to get in contact with you if anyone in the audience or any of my brother or sister shows want to have you on their shows? And then the second one will follow up after.
I think either Instagram or Facebook. If you look up Pet Apocalypse, it's a brand or a company we have or whatever. But if people will reach out to there, then we'll answer and get back to them.
All right, Pet Apocalypse. Hope I spelled that right. On Instagram and Facebook, that's loading on there. And then the second question we asked our guests is what's 3 things the Misfit Nation can start doing tomorrow to be better humans?
Be grateful, show gratitude and, express it to not just your family and friends, but, you're out in public and you interact with people, thank them, for the things they're doing. They're providing you a service. They don't have to do that. So I think that is definitely one, is gratitude.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, acts of kindness. For me, it's normally for animals, hit your brakes when you see a possum trying to cross the road, maybe help turtles across the road. And for me, that's a big one. Don't run over the snake. Let it go across the road.
And then number 3, be vulnerable. So don't be afraid to admit to your mistakes, and learn from them.
Outstanding. 3 good ones. And speaking of a turtle, today I was home alone, of course, and my lab and my whippet were outside just being quiet for a change. And I looked up on the hill and they're just sitting there. So I know they're doing something wrong because they're sitting together, not fighting. And I run up there and they have surrounded a turtle in our backyard, but the turtle hid in the shell. So they were both confused of what to do at that point. They didn't know what to do. So they just sat there looking at the shell that was once moving. It's now just dead stop. So I took it and put it under the fence into the farm behind us. So it would live to fight another day. Cassie, Jeremy, thank you for hanging out tonight and being vulnerable and answering some of the audience questions. Some real good questions. Yeah, right on key.
All right.
If you guys ever want to come back on, just let me know. I'll get you on here. And if you ever need anything, let me know as well.
All right. We appreciate it, Rich.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
All right. You too.
For every veteran, there is a story about a calling to serve, to fight for the freedoms of the American people. And every story has a struggle, a sacrifice, and invisible wounds. Warrior Watts programs help veterans recover from PTSD and invisible wounds through exercise, nutrition, and connecting with other veteran leaders. It is estimated that 22 veterans die each day by suicide, and another 30 veterans die each day by substance abuse. These are preventable deaths. Warrior Watt is committed to fighting PTSD through fitness, nutrition, and community.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling because we are Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.